Thank you so much, Emma, for being my guest on season two of my podcast. You're my first guest this season, so I'm really interested to see where this goes. I've been wanting to speak with you for a while now because I've been following your work, especially when a colleague of mine and I did our research in parenting leave in higher education. So let's start with a quick introduction.
Okay, thank you. I'm really, really pleased, and I hope I live up to being the first person in this series. Um, so my name is Emma Bolger. I'm Dr. Emma Bolger, which is a title that I tend to only bring out when I really need to carry weight and impress people. So I am primarily an academic in my roles. I am a university lecturer, senior lecturer, and program leader of a postgraduate course in career guidance. And I also still continue to teach part time for the Open University. I've worked for the Open University as a distance lecturer for about 15 years now. Um, I have three children myself. I have a 10-year-old, a 5-year-old, and at this point, 10-month-old. So by the time this goes out, she's got to go at least tipped out into the 11 months. So there's 5 years between them all. I have a son, a daughter, and a second daughter. They're spread out. They're spread out, 5 years between them. Um, and I think that in itself is worth commenting on. You may find that a lot of career theory talks about the most ideal gap to have between your children. That often comes up as 5 years in between them all. It was probably 5 years the first time round was a good amount of time for a gap for between us when with the setup that I have myself, my husband, and we don't have family nearby that we can rely on for childcare and so on. So we've always needed to use paid for childcare, and once you've got one in school, the childcare cost goes down significantly. So it was an opportune moment to go for another at that stage. With my second child, so this was 5 years ago, I took a very short maternity leave as well, which is something that's notable. I only took 3 months, and we took use of shared parental leave at that stage. And then for my third child, I say she's come along. I'm a bit older. I'm 44 now. I had her when I was 43, which does in a lot of ways tie in with people having children older. But the fact that she's my third, I felt a lot more prepared for it. But I also feel like she's an absolute bonus to us. Didn't expect to be sitting around at 43 with a newborn baby. Would have liked her to have perhaps come along a bit sooner, but babies come when babies are ready to come, and we all have the ups and downs of that journey. So she came along last year, and now I'm definitely starting to feel a little bit like I might be in the mummy or granny stage when she's getting to the later stages of her primary school. Through having children in school over the last 10 years now, so 10 years for my eldest, so he's been in school now, he's in what in Scotland is primary six, would be year five in England and Wales. um, I've ended up being quite involved in the school as well. I've done a lot around the school's parent council and volunteer work around education as well, which is I've really enjoyed doing. I've really enjoyed being part of, and I particularly interested in additional support needs or special educational needs within education. I've done quite a bit of volunteer work around that. My children are in Gaelic medium education in Scotland as well, which is one of the smaller mainstream provisions of education, still state education, but is something that does require a bit more effort on the parental part. And from doing that, I've ended up being involved in Glasgow City Parents Group, where I'm vice chair. So I may talk about that a little bit as well, and the importance of parental voice within education as well. We're primarily a group that's focused around children's experiences, but children's experiences are, of course, directly linked to the parents and carers that are around them. Um, I am also now, I sit a really, really, really strong advocate for the importance of parental voice. And I now also sit on the board of directors of Connect in Scotland, which is the the kind of umbrella organisation for parent councils and parent groups as well. So lots going on as well as my day job at the moment. And I've worked in a variety of jobs over the last, say, 20 years. I've always been linked in some way to either career guidance and career work, or further higher education. Always been working in the education sector, and working in the public sector in related jobs to careers as well. So very much sitting within that area. And you in a lot of ways, I would say my knowledge and experience of working in the career guidance profession has meant that I've been fairly confident in how I've navigated what's available. I've been aware of that. I think the most important thing to say about my experience as a working mum is that all three maternity leaves, all three lead up to maternity leave, all three periods of maternity, all three periods of going back after have been completely different and absolutely shaped by how my work has been at that stage, how my family situation has been at that stage. A lot of it has been around being pragmatic for what works best for me and my family at each point. As I already mentioned, we've used things like shared parental leave. I've had periods where I've been the main person on maternity leave, taking a shorter or longer period of leave. This time around, I've taken a full year from my main job, but I only took 9 months from my secondary job, so I'm going back and ticking over again. Um, I have a different family situation. I have different children at different ages, at different stages in school, different support networks around me. Once your children start going to school, you find that you've got someone that you can speak to for, well, can you get them off the school bus this day? I'll do another day. You've got that network there that works and is a network of people that fully understand where you're coming from. Um, so each one has been different, and I would say the most important thing that we can have for any working mother looking to return to work is a range of options. We know shared parental leave, it might not work for everybody, but it worked for us in 1 in 3. It worked really, really well. It meant that I went back to work at a time when I needed to focus on my career. My husband was working part time then. He took the shared parental leave. We didn't feel a hit on the finances. He was able to spend lots of time with the children. He was also able to study at the same time. He was studying part time and retrained in a different sector. There's Each time there's been a different reason for wanting to choose a different option. And I know there are criticisms of each and every form of leave or parental leave or paternity leave or maternity, whatever there are so many different permutations. Not all will work at the same time. Not all will be suitable. But to be able to have something that you can actually pick and choose from and have a variety, that's been what has made it work for us. But ultimately, all of the choices, you're just coming down to the pragmatic, what works at each time, um, and being fully informed about what that might be in terms of the impact on your household finances, on your own career development, and so on. Um, so it does. I feel like it does come down a lot to what's the policy and how do I make it work for me has been my first and foremost.
Thanks a lot for that, Emma. I'm intrigued on the policy aspect. As you know, I've always been keen on whether academically or otherwise looking into parental leaves and also its impact on things like breastfeeding.
Mhm.
Now, being in your position, you have your pulse on policy, you know where to look. Um, as a vice chair in the City Parents Network and all the other roles that you play, what's your observations in terms of, do parents know where to look? Are they given that support? What's actually the ground reality for someone who does not have that knowledge base that you do?
Completely inconsistent across the board. You could have the same people, two people working in the same organization will have a completely different perspective on what's available to them and how that's going to work in practice. That can be down to something as simple as a line manager being aware or not aware of what policies are in place. It can be down to the flexibility and the structure of your workplace. Do you work in a team where working flexibly will work, or are you in a workplace where actually these are the fixed hours that we need you in here physically doing the job? Um, I think we're all becoming a little bit more aware of the importance of thinking about what your working day or your working week looks like in advance. I would certainly, when working as a career in career guidance, when I'm working privately with a client, we have to be upfront. You can't ask in an interview, do you want to have children, right? Your employers know we're way past these days. Are you going to have any kids, and are you going to be off for up to a year when I need someone on the job? But as careers advisors, these are the kinds of conversations we should be having. It should be upfront. Are you planning a family? Right? What are you thinking about that? How's that going to work? Um, you need to plan in advance. Now, you need to think about who's going to do what, being really clear and upfront in advance of, well, when this baby arrives or this next child, when whatever happens, how does that look? And I think people are scrutinizing policies a bit more now. I think it's quite easy to assume that certain workplaces will have an enhanced and better offer, and that's not necessarily so either. My experience of working in higher education has been that different institutions offer different lengths of time. For example, for your statutory and your occupational maternity leave, you've got your statutory in place, but you've got your occupational maternity leave. That enhanced period can vary quite significantly from employer to employer, and that certainly did also affect when we took shared parental leave. It became a really pragmatic decision around the finances. Um, so it comes down to, I think, understanding that a policy is in place. It is really helpful to have, the major organisations that have got a really good voice, places like Pregnant Then Screwed, are fantastic for just constantly giving that message out, being around, and we're looking at, we've got a lot of things like you've got your algorithms on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, those sort of things where, you might be looking at, you might be looking at an advert for a new cot, or looking at, and you'll also then, you may get something from one of these organizations crops up on your feed as well, and there's that messaging around, like, you know what, this isn't going to be so easy. It's not happy days. You don't have a baby and then trot off for 9 months and come back and everything's shiny and easy, and everything's in place. You are going to have trouble getting childcare. There's going to be, they're going to be, so we are getting better at that messaging, that it's not going to be an easy journey, and really having that upfront conversation about if this is going to be challenging, is really important. Um, we also need to, just as employers, convey that this shouldn't be a problem. This is, having a child and needing time off, whether you're a mother or father, whatever your position is in relation to caring for a child and needing to take time off, this shouldn't be an issue. This shouldn't be a problem, and it shouldn't be seen to be a problem. Um, and the how you treat your employee in that period is so important. What you want is someone to come back, having had a period away, coming back feeling refreshed. I don't know about lots of other parents, but coming away for a wee while and then coming back, having had children, I think massively improves your productivity and your focus, because you've got X period of time to be at your desk or wherever you are to get the job done. Right, you're not wandering off for a chat around, the old days of having a chat around the water cooler. You're not wasting your time in it. You're coming in, you're being really efficient, because you are in your whole life time poor. From the second you have a child, they are your focus. Everything else is kind of additional bonus time for that. Um, you really start to value what you do with every hour of the day. Um, and treating your employee well during that period is what makes them want to come back. It makes them want to be back in your workplace and feel like that's a home to them as well, and that they're going to be there for a long time after that. The time when having a child is um, really disruptive is actually quite minimal. It's compared to the long length of someone's career in with an employer. Someone gets to, I don't know, 40, 50 years service with an employer, if those days ever exist again. They're not going to look back and go, "Oh, do you remember in year 8 when you were working for us and you had to have those 6 months off to look after your kid?" These things shouldn't be something that we fuss about to such an extent in that long period of career. And we're going to be working for long periods of time. We're going to be working for easily up to 40, 50 years, many of us, with the state of pensions and finances and so on. At this point, we're going to be working for a long time. We're going to be seeing people working way beyond retirement age. We're going to see people wanting to go back into the workplace. It's I've certainly worked as well as a private practitioner with clients who, if they get to the 60s, they've worked maybe since they left school. They get to retirement age, they got and they want straight back in to do something with
Yeah.
their time. They're coming back, and actually, for me, keeping going was not necessarily a financial choice, but a personal choice for their well-being as well. And again, they wouldn't be looked at as people who, at some point in their history had a family and it caused a problem. It wouldn't, these are not things that we need to prioritize. We really need to think about the bigger picture and how this all fits together. Yeah, the a few. I mean, I think it's also very, very, very workplace dependent. It's very much your team and who you work with. Um, And we the gender balance in the workplace can have an impact on this very clearly. The gender balance can, and that um, it can certainly be something where you've got, again, for example, career guidance is a sort of 70-30 female dominated sector. It's just expected that people working in it's a public sector job in the main. It's just expected that somebody will be off on maternity leave. We backfill that and then they come back. These are straightforward kind of expectations when you are working in that kind of role, and it doesn't seem to be quite such a problem. You might get, and I also think, we're far from the where we were. I'm thinking like, like my parents' generation, where it was, well, you've had a bit, you're leaving to have a baby. You're leaving, you're left, you're gone, you're out the work. Like your card would be, you're leaving, see ya, you've had a baby, you're not coming back. We're far, far removed now from where we were 40 years ago, even, where it would be an expectation of you've left the workplace and what you're thinking of going back to work. You're going to work while your child or children are young. We've moved on, and we will move on. We will have to move on, and it would just be good to see policy moving a bit more swiftly to get us there.
I
Because
agree.
what will the workplace look like in another 20, 30 years? Well, it's a workplace where we are going to need as many people, to become for all of the economic reasons, for all the social and well-being reasons, um, we are going to be in work, and work needs to be set up to work for us. Ultimately, the major issue underpinning all of this is we can have the best policies in place. We can have, lovely setup. We've got shared parental leave. You've got longer periods of paternity leave. You've got better enhanced maternity leave pay and all that. We've got like, but if we haven't got childcare behind any of that, if we haven't got a really solid infrastructure, if we do not see childcare as a complete backbone of society, if we don't fund it better, if we don't increase the funding to providers, if we don't increase and improve the flexibility, we can't get there. And ultimately, underneath everything is childcare. It's the at this point, childcare makes things very, very, the inequity of what some,
Yeah.
it can be. You can have the same policy in place for two people doing the identical job, doing identical work, but one of them happens to have youthful, healthy grandparents on tap at the end of the road who can pick up the child and look after them all day, every day. There's no cost implication compared to somebody who has absolutely no network and is struggling to find a nursery place. You are worn down if you're in that second category. There is such a range of different support networks out there for people and access to childcare, and the cost, the inconsistent cost, the availability. We have been very lucky with our paid for childcare providers, and they have been available, they have been local, and that has also had a massive impact. We've needed to use paid for childcare. It's been there and it's been available. Um,
Mm.
and that has made, yeah, a huge difference. If we'd not had that, at least one of us would have had to leave their work. And these sorts of things are also compounded when you have a child with additional support needs. Um, we are, I should say, mentioned my eldest son definitely has additional support needs. He needs support in a range of ways, um, which wasn't is doesn't have a massive impact on his day-to-day life at this point. It may become more challenging actually as he gets older, um, but anybody with a child that needs a little bit more focus and attention and support, that in itself as well it's doubling the work. It's extra time, and it's also much wearing you down much more as a parent. You
The
need
emotional
support.
load of it.
It's absolutely that. Um, so there's every child is different. Every experience is different. Numbers, sometimes people will, I've new friends, I have friends who've got 6 children, and we're always in awe of how they manage, but they just barrel through, and then I know parents who have one child and say that I could never do another. I find it, again, you don't know until you're sitting there with a baby what things are going to be, what things are really going to be like, um until that child has arrived. um,
So, Emma, what are your thoughts on organization based childcare? Because I know in the higher education industry, some places do that. It's not very commonplace, but there are some who do it. So having that as a support system for the employees, having childcare at the organization,
Mhm.
rather than leaving the employees to find something for themselves. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a really interesting one, this, because I remember being sort of a teenager and going into and later in my first jobs. I remember at my school there was a very local creche. There was childcare at my, so that kind of tells you about a little bit about sort of the school perhaps that I went to when I was growing up. It was you know, we're sort of at the sort of the late 90s when we did have a crisis of teenage pregnancies. We had concerns about people never entering the workforce because of having children early. We also, I'm in an area where I grew up in a part of the country where, you know, very notably one of the most poverty-stricken areas of the country for a long time, and very low aspirations and very, you know, sort of lower level, what we'd call achievement in terms of sort of education and employment and so on. And there were interventions. There was childcare available for young parents or for people wanting to re-enter the workplace, particularly, you know, single mums later in life. So there was a creche available there at the school if you wanted to go and study, um, do GCSEs or A levels or whatever, and get yourself back started. I also remember when I first started working, I do remember working in higher education 20 years ago, and there being a creche. I do remember there being childcare on site for staff. There is sometimes mention of this mythical childcare. The place I'm working now, every now and then someone says, "Oh, there was a nursery here back in the day," and they've disappeared. They've gone, and I remember when I first did start looking at it, I was like, well, where's the workplace nursery? You know, you come in naive, like, well, surely there must be something for staff, and there isn't. Um, I would love to see a return to that. I would love to see a return. I also would love to see that, particularly for higher education for students to be able to access as well. The one of the and it's funny, I was talking to a colleague just in the last couple of weeks who said we need to move our nursery provider. Can you recommend anywhere between our house and where our workplace is that you know of that will have space at this point? And it needs to be on the commute. It needs to be on the commute for both me and my partner to get there. Um, and that is tricky. That is, you know, particularly with a, you know, we've got a bit of a move towards a slight element of presenteeism starting to creep in some workplaces again. Um, but having, you know, unless your childcare is on the doorstep, there's, you know, it's not going to be great for people. Um, there are challenges because for me, if I was working part time, for instance, I don't want to be taking my child to my workplace on the days that my nurse, you know, especially if you're using, you need to, for example, and this is where it all becomes pragmatic, it all becomes, well, if I do this and do that, and you've got to kind of like, you've got your spider diagram, well, if I to put them in that nursery, I use my full allocation of funding there, but that means that I have to go there on the days when I'm not passing there. So I've got an additional journey there. So I'm losing my time there, and I can't go there on that day because I've got to pick up that child on that time, and I've got this, and I need to be able. So you start having to, everything's sort of like the logistics of it all becomes important. Um, we need flexibility in terms of how you can use that childcare provision. So if it is a case of I actually only need workplace provision on these dates, um, I need it at my workplace on these dates, great, and I can use the rest of my provision elsewhere. That's really important. Again, it comes back to this variety of options
Yeah.
being available.
Just jumping on from that, because again, with your experience in career guidance as well, I was thinking on university websites and higher education in general, we keep talking about inclusivity and widening access to participation, and these are kind of used in many ways as like a tokenism. You see that everywhere now. But if we are truly looking at inclusivity and widening access, then from a student standpoint, uh, again, going back to what you initially said about childcare, but not just for staff, for students as well. So, if there is someone who wants to retrain, if there's a young parent who wants to change their career, do a master's, having childcare provision, a colleague of mine did our research on the breastfeeding side of it, and we realized that very few universities have breastfeeding provisions for students and staff both. There were really, really horrific numbers. But again, if we truly talk about inclusivity and widening access, shouldn't universities be providing these options so that they can get attract students who want to return to the workforce or change careers?
Absolutely. So this is, again, you've got often a mix between your university's wider policy, particularly on child access. I have, gosh, again, probably about 10 years ago now, I did my own little research project myself about how welcoming university libraries were for me as a parent
Mm,
pushing a pram, and inconsistent across the board. And I have to say, the universities that were most welcoming weren't the explicit widening participation universities. The universities where I actually got felt most welcome, it was a surprise where they were. Um, still somewhere hidden on my blog. I think that the
mm,
post about that experience. Um, the there are university policies that are around child access, and so there are different things to put in place. So, for example, I run a postgraduate course. We have a high number of women returners come to our course. We do not start teaching until 10, and we finish teaching by 2.
mm,
That is mindful of the fact that you not only do you need to get your child to your childcare provider, you need to be able to then get to the university if it's on campus or back home if you're doing an online class that day. We also do not teach during school holiday weeks. So, and this works for me and other
mm,
staff on the program who have children. We don't teach. We adjust our timetable. We have the power to do that. We're a small program. We're a team of 3 at most. We have small numbers of students, and we are able to timetable accordingly. That would not work on a massive undergraduate social sciences program where we've got hundreds of students and multiple lecturers. Um, so you are tied in a lot of ways to the expectation of what a course will run like and how it will run like. But particularly at postgraduate level, I believe there is a lot that we can do to encourage people back and to make it a much more welcoming space. Being very explicit about that
mm,
as well in marketing materials and having conversations again with people. We have pre-induction sessions during the summer, and I always say, if you need to come on, feel free to bring your children along to that
yeah,
if you need to. Ironically, since we've been doing that, my university has brought in a policy where to bring a child onto campus, you do need to go through various levels of authorization.
yeah.
So now, again, how this looks in policy compared to practice will differ. Um, but I would certainly, and many of my colleagues, I can't think of any colleagues that I've worked with who, if a student came in and said, my childcare has collapsed, or my child they're just not feeling great today and I need to keep them with me. If you came to a class with a child, I can't think of anyone that would be, no, you mustn't come in,
Mm,
out my door, away you go. We have this assumption that, and this is, there's always this child access, don't bring your child into the library. Just this weird assumption that every child just turns completely feral and starts smashing the place up as soon as they get
yeah.
in, right? Just the assumption that all children, babies are just screaming constantly, right? There's no parent is going to come in and go, I'll just go and sit in that library with my screaming baby and try and get my essay done. That's not going to happen. You're going to go, right, they're asleep. I've got 30 minutes here. I'm coming in, I'm sitting down, I'm getting it done. As soon as that baby wakes up, we move on. Um, so that, again, the policies can be off-putting, I think would be the best way to
Yeah.
say that.
Funnily enough, one of the universities I've been involved in the past, they had a policy where you could bring a toddler in as a staff member or a postgraduate researcher, but you couldn't bring a baby in. And their logic was that toddlers can walk. And my initial, like after the horrific look I had on my face, my question was, so you're saying a toddler who can walk and run around and open doors is lesser of a risk from because they were talking about health and safety than a infant who's going to be in the pram not able to do things on their own. Like, how does that even make sense? And I just couldn't because they're like, oh, it's a health and safety policy. You can't have infants. But yeah, I've had because I most of my teaching is remote. I do online classes, and I've had mums breastfeeding on my course, and I'm fine with it because I know that be- sometimes because they know my background, they're a bit more comfortable telling me about it. So, but anyways, I know that we are close on time. So, one last question from me, because I think we could talk forever.
I think we could.
is-
I think one of the other things to say is just with my second child, I've breastfed all of mine and so far until they're two. My daughter was my middle daughter was known as the university baby. You know, they saw her being pushed around by her dad, and it was we knew you were in because we saw the baby. And I fed her in between teaching, and she had to come, and he just had to walk the streets of where my university is because she would never ever take any express milk.
Mm,
She would only breastfeed, and that meant that she had to be close to me until she was 3 months old when I went back. So that was the first 3 months, and it was fine. Discreetly dropped off into I had a private office. There were just two of us. I wasn't going to use any of the breastfeeding facilities on campus. It was, she was going to come in. Um, that now that again we just did that. It was just a team of two. I would probably need to get authorization from my line manager each time that
mm,
we wanted to do that now if we were going by the policy. And there's been a couple of other things that since being a parent I've been active about, just things like we have high chairs in our student canteen now. Never had high, and how much is one of those IKEA, the white
yes.
anti-lock high, about £13, aren't they? And I just went to the catering manager and said, look, we need it. And he straight away was like, you're right, you're absolutely bang on, um, and he was like, I'm just going to nip up to IKEA and spend 50 quid on high chairs because it
Mm,
looks like we welcome children. It's rather than that. Now, I don't know where those high chairs are now if we've got a child policy that doesn't want any children coming in unauthorized. But to public spaces, there shouldn't be an issue. These
no,
are public
and
open spaces.
I feel actions speak louder than words. And whenever I go, whether it's a restaurant, traveling around, even office buildings, I always keep my eyes peeled out for are there signs of parents being welcome here,
Yes.
and for me that also includes gender neutral diaper change.
Yeah.
You know,
Oh gosh, I mean, yes, there was. I remember again my husband being on walking the baby and the amount of like random places that he'd had to change a nappy. There was a couple of sports centre, or you can go into the men's changing rooms if you
mm,
want, do her on a bench or do him on a bench. It was like okay. Yeah, just going in, there's no, I mean, toilet, I could go on about gender neutral toilets until the
mm,
cows come home, but I just, oh, yes, the lack of baby changing spaces is, and also that we have to the clogging up of disabled toilets for
yes.
baby changing. They can a disabled person not please have this toilet to themselves? They don't need to go in and have a bucket of stinking nappies and me blocking the space because I've got a nappy to change. Just wild. Like, yeah, definitely. I'm sure
Yes.
we could all go on about toilets until the day
Oh,
till the
yeah.
end of days. I think.
And facilities and infrastructure, and
Absolutely.
I will, I think, catch up offline with you on some of these anyway, because I think there's a lot uh, in common with that common interests that we have. But one
Absolutely.
last thing is for the people listening, if there is one piece of advice, a golden nugget for mums who are either planning to have a kid or just returning to work, what would that be?
Um, I would say you are not going to know how you feel about your situation until you're there. However well planned you may think your maternity leave is going to be, or your return to work after you have a child, whether it be one child, whether it be your second, third, fourth, fifth child, every time will be different. And no matter how well you plan, children do their own thing. Every child is different, and when you're not going to know for certain until you get there. Nothing is concrete. Um, so yes, however, plan ahead as best as you can. Look at every policy, speak to people, um, but expect the unexpected because children do their children thing, and what you're expecting from them and how you will feel once you're there and at that stage may change.
Thank you so much for speaking with me. I know your little one's waiting for you. So I will, thank you so much once again. I just stopped.
Lovely.